Welcome back everyone. Let's go ahead and talk about none other than the Samsung Galaxy A10 and see how it holds up in 2021. Now first of all, this phone came out a couple of years ago in 2019, so it's definitely not new, but it's not a completely old, crazy phone either. And one thing I love about Samsung Galaxy A series of devices is that they are a cheaper alternative to their S series. Now, it definitely does miss some features here and there, but it's really interesting to see what Samsung is able to do at a cheaper price tag, and this is an A series device from 2019, so it's almost 2 years old. I think it is like 2 years old at this point. Now, if you want to pick up this phone, and I guess some other phones that I'd recommend this year, links will be down in the description below. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the front, the Samsung Galaxy A10 had a pretty big 6.2-inch IPS panel. It was 720p, so it wasn't like a crazy high resolution. It didn't have like, OLED display, but it really wasn't that bad. It's about the same size as the Samsung Galaxy S21, and interestingly enough, even though this was kind of like a budget phone, not even kind of, it was a budget phone completely, you did actually have that Infinity V display, which was actually pretty interesting, because typically when you think of a budget phone, you don't think of a phone that looks like this. You think of a phone like maybe like a super old, maybe like a Pixel 1 or something like that. Not the case here. Samsung did a really good job at the design of these phones. There are some other areas where it's not really the best, but I would definitely say the design of this phone gets a thumbs up for me. There's very little bezel around the front as well, and it does kind of look still like a Samsung Galaxy S21 in a way, and there's no curved edge to it or anything, but I would still say the panel of this thing looks pretty good. You do have a micro USB port on this thing, so no USB Type-C. You have a headphone jack, but you still have that micro SD card slot, which I think is pretty cool. So you can easily go and expand that storage if you want to, and again, that's another pretty big asset for it for sure. Now you do have a plastic back on this device, no removable battery or anything like that, but I would definitely say for the price tag of this phone, it is still pretty interesting of what type of device you're able to get for this type of, price range, for sure. Now you have that single camera setup on the back as well, and you have a little bit of a speaker on the bottom of this device, which isn't really the best, but again, for the price tag of this phone, you kind of have to keep that in mind, and I think it's okay for the most part. So in terms of that, the A series for sure gets a thumbs up for me in my books for the A10 at least. It definitely isn't, going to compete with something like a Samsung Galaxy S20 or S10 or something like that, but I think it gets the job done for the most part. So in terms of that and the body, that pretty much covers it up. Now hitting on the camera on the back, this thing does have that 13 megapixel wide-angle lens on the back, and there's really not a crazy amount of things to it. I mean, it's a 13 megapixel camera, so you may think it's like a really high megapixel count, and that kind of is the case, but you're missing out on so many different features. I think for the price tag of this phone, it's okay, but even if you get like the original Google Pixel, you're going to be getting a better type of camera from that phone than this one, and they're about the same price range in the used market. So you're getting a single sensor, so keep that in mind. It's definitely not a triple camera setup or anything. It's a single wide angle lens, so you're already kind of missing out on things in that standpoint. But on top of that, you can only film in 1080p. You don't have any 4K, you don't have any 1080p at 60. You are literally stuck at 1080p at 30. And I think that is a pretty big deal in and of itself. When you have a device like this, you are kind of getting a good looking body, but you're, missing out on some really good camera quality. It's definitely not that great of a camera quality. I think it looks deceiving because it looks like it's better than it is. The UI is actually pretty similar to what, One UI has. It is running One UI, but it's very similar to what, the latest Samsung Galaxy S21, that UI looks like. So in a way, it is kind of misleading, but I mean, it gets the job done for the most part. If you need a camera, then go for it. It also has a 5 megapixel front-facing camera. And again, this is another area where this device kind of takes an L in. When you have a device like this, you want the camera to last as long as possible, and you're not really going to be getting that type of crazy quality from this type of camera lens. So at the end of the day, that's kind of how I'd sum up the camera. It's definitely not that great. It definitely could be, having some improvement here and there, but again, there's nothing we can do about it. And for a budget phone, I guess it's not bad, but for a 2021 phone, it's really not that great in my opinion. So in terms of that pretty much covers it up. Now moving on to, I think, probably the worst aspect of this phone is still the software. So this thing started off with a One UI 1, which is on Android 9. But as of right now, I don't think it's getting Android 11. It is pretty outdated for the most part. And that is probably one of the biggest things about this specific device. When you have a phone like this, you don't want to pick up a phone that's just already outdated. Like, that is completely against, my willpower and against what I believe in. I just totally believe in still getting phones that either can be custom ROM fairly easily, have a, big development support, or are still supported natively from their developer. This is probably still getting security updates, but even if you pick it up now, even if it got Android 11, it is still outdated. You don't want to get a phone that's already outdated. I think that's already a problem in and of itself. So that is one area. And I think even on Android 10, it's not that bad. It's not that far behind. But if you're watching this video like months from now or a year from now, you're going to have to ask yourself, is this the type of device you want to get just based off the software? That in and of itself is one thing that I would recommend people to stay away from this phone from completely. That is a humongous thing in my opinion. However, on the flip side, a really good thing about this device is actually the battery life. This thing has a 3400 milliamp battery inside of it. And I think that's actually a pretty good size and a good healthy size battery on this thing. When you get this phone, you're not going to feel like you have a really outdated battery life or battery size. So that's a huge plus. And it's not even that powerful. And it's not like a super high resolution display that it has to push either. So you're really getting some really good battery life from this thing. But on the flip side, the performance and the software may not be the best. So you're going to be able to use this phone for much longer durations, but it may not give you the best quality in terms of the performance and in terms of the software. So in terms of that pretty much covers up simultaneously the worst thing about this phone and the best thing about this phone, which is the battery life. Now, ending it off with the performance, this device does have that Exynos 7884 chipset inside of it, an octa-core CPU, and 2 GB of RAM on their base model, and then 4 GB of RAM on the top tier model. Now, this is a humongous thing about this phone because both the bottom tier model and the top tier model are both kind of strange. With 2 GB of RAM, you are definitely not getting a good experience by any means, in my opinion. Like, if you just text and call people and maybe go to Snapchat every once in a while, like, this is probably that type of performance that I would recommend people to pick up this phone. But because the software is already outdated in a way, it's already not really a good choice in my opinion. But the major thing to keep in mind is that this device is topped out at 4 GB of RAM. Even the original Google Pixel will get you a better experience because that thing gives you a much better chipset. But on top of that, gives you the same amount of RAM as the top tier model here. So I would honestly not even recommend getting a Galaxy A10 just based off the performance. A device like the Pixel 4a is going to be giving you much better performance at the end of the day. And that's going to be a really, really good performing device for the most part. But this thing, it'll get the job done if you're trying to do like very, very basic things. But if you're trying to step it up a notch, and if you're trying to do like more intensive apps, more intensive games, if you're trying to do heavy gaming on this thing, you're not going to get a good experience from this thing. So that's an extremely important thing to keep in mind. Again, you don't want to use a phone that's already outdated, but on top of that, you don't want to use a phone that is already, kind of at the end of its performance life cycle. So I think in that, and when you think about it like that, that pretty much makes me think that I probably wouldn't recommend getting a Galaxy A10 for a performance standpoint. If you get it for a really good price or something like that, that's different, but I wouldn't recommend picking up this phone just based off the performance. So in terms of that pretty much covers it up. Now, to kind of sum up this video and to answer the question, should you go and pick up a Samsung Galaxy A10 in 2021? Well, this is what I'll tell you. I would honestly tell you no. I don't think you should actually go out of your way to pick up a Samsung Galaxy A10 in 2021. I think there's a multitude of other phones you can pick up for even like $100 that will give you a much better experience than this thing. Automatically, I think of phones like the original Pixel, the Pixel 2. You can probably get those phones for around the same price as this thing in the used market, and you're probably going to get a much better experience from those phones than this one. I think some of the biggest things about this phone that I really wouldn't recommend people to buy it for are things like the build quality. I feel like the screen and everything looks great, but it definitely doesn't feel like the best phone. But even beyond that, the software, which is already kind of outdated, you're already kind of stuck in a little bubble. So you're already kind of in a situation where you're going to have to go and upgrade your phone sooner than later just because of the software. The performance also isn't really that great. You are getting a budget phone, but I feel like the A11 is a much better phone than this thing. But on top of that, the camera is not that great. You're running micro USB port, which is kind of, outdated at this point. And you would be so much better off getting something like the original Pixel or the Pixel 2. Those devices will probably get you a much better experience than this thing, in my opinion. So in terms of that pretty much covers it up. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section as well. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count. So it means so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.